By the time the sun rose over Chicago on March 15, 17 buildings were nothing but ash and twisted steel. The smell of gasoline and burnt wood hung so thick in the air you could taste it. Firefighters would later say they'd never seen anything like it. The precision, the timing, the sheer audacity of setting an entire neighborhood ablaze in under 3 hours. The police scanner recordings from that night are chilling. Dispatch calling for backup. Sirens wailing. People screaming. And somewhere in all that chaos, witnesses reported seeing a man standing on a rooftop, completely still, watching his work burn. They said the glow of his cigarette was the only thing moving in the darkness. His name was Kim Jae-sung. And by morning he'd become the most wanted man in Illinois. But here's what the news didn't tell you. Here's what the FBI didn't understand. This wasn't the act of a madman. This wasn't random violence or a psychotic break. This was revenge. Pure, calculated, burn-it-all-down revenge. To understand why Kim Jae-sung torched 17 buildings and destroyed millions of dollars in property, why he threw away everything he'd spent his entire life building, we need to go back 6 months earlier. To a winter night in Chicago. To the moment he met the woman who would change absolutely everything. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button. This story gets darker, more twisted, and more devastating than you can imagine, and you're not going to want to miss what happens next. So here's the question I need you to think about as we go through this. What could possibly make a man who has everything, power, money, respect, decide to burn his entire world to the ground? Drop your theories in the comments because I promise you whatever you're thinking right now, you're wrong. 6 months earlier. September 2024. Kim Jae-sung was 34 years old and arguably the most powerful crime boss on Chicago's North Side. But to understand Jae-sung, you have to understand where he came from. His father, Kim Dae-young, immigrated to Chicago in 1987 with $300 and a dream that had nothing to do with the American dream you read about in textbooks. Dae-young built the Baekho Syndicate, the White Tiger Syndicate, from absolutely nothing. Started with a single gambling den above a laundromat in Koreatown. Within 15 years he controlled protection rackets, underground gambling and smuggling operations across 3 states. Jae-sung grew up in this world. He didn't choose it, he was born into it. While other kids were playing Little League, he was sitting in the back of restaurants watching his father negotiate deals that could end in either handshakes or bloodshed. He learned to read people before he learned to read books. He understood leverage before he understood algebra. When Jae-sung was 28, his father was assassinated. Shot 6 times in his own restaurant by someone he trusted for 12 years. Someone who'd eaten at their family table. Someone his father had considered a brother. Jae-sung found him. Held his father while he bled out on the floor of the kitchen where Jae-sung's mother used to make manduguk on New Year's Day. That night changed him. He took over the Baekho Syndicate the next week, and within 6 months he'd eliminated everyone involved in his father's death. Not loudly. Not messily. They just disappeared. And everyone in Chicago's underworld understood, the son was not the father. Kim Dae-young had been fierce but fair. Kim Jae-sung was something else entirely. They started calling him the Ice Prince. Not because he was cold, though he was, but because he was untouchable, unreachable. Like he existed behind a wall of ice that no one could penetrate. By 34, Jae-sung lived in a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. Wore custom suits. Drove a Mercedes S-Class. On paper he was a successful businessman with legitimate ventures. Restaurants, real estate, import, export. Below the surface he ran one of the most profitable criminal organizations in the Midwest. But he had rules. Strict ones. No drugs. No human trafficking. No involving civilians who didn't choose this life. In a world of monsters, Jae-sung tried to be a monster with principles. Still he was alone. Completely, utterly alone. He trusted no one. Kept everyone at arm's length. Had women sure but never let anyone close enough to matter. He'd learned that lesson watching his father's blood pool on cold tile, killed by trust. Every night he'd stand on his balcony looking out at the city lights, smoking Marlboro Reds, and wonder if this was all there was. Power. Money. Respect. And this crushing, suffocating loneliness. He wore a mask so well that sometimes he forgot there was a face underneath. While Jae-sung stood in his glass tower looking down at Chicago, Diana Morrison was in the trenches of that same city, trying to keep it alive. Diana was 31 years old and had been an emergency room nurse at Cook County Hospital for 8 years. If you don't know Cook County, let me paint you a picture. It's where Chicago bleeds. Gunshot wounds. Stab wounds. Overdoses. The casualties of poverty and violence and a system that's broken in ways that are hard to articulate until you're standing in it, covered in someone else's blood, trying to save a 16-year-old who got caught in crossfire on his way to school. Diana worked the night shift. Midnight to 8 a.m. The worst hours when the worst cases came through those doors. She grew up on the South Side. Her family didn't have much, but they had each other. Until they didn't. When Diana was 16, her older brother Marcus was killed. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong colors in the wrong neighborhood. He was 19 years old, heading home from community college, and he died on a street corner while people drove past without stopping. Diana held his hand while they waited for an ambulance that took 23 minutes to arrive. 23 minutes. He died 2 minutes before they got there. That night, sitting in a hospital waiting room while her mother sobbed and her father sat in stunned silence, Diana made a decision. She couldn't save Marcus. But she could save someone else's Marcus. Someone else's brother, sister, son, daughter. She became a nurse. Not for the money, God knows there wasn't any. Not for the glory, there was even less of that. She became a nurse because she needed to matter. Needed to feel like Marcus's death meant something, led to something, saved someone. By 31, Diana was a single mother. Her daughter Zoe was 7 years old. Zoe's father left when she was 2, decided fatherhood wasn't for him, and Diana hadn't heard from him since. She didn't need him. She was strong enough to do this alone. But strong doesn't mean easy. Diana worked double shifts whenever she could. Lived in a small apartment that was clean but cramped. Saved every penny trying to afford a better school district, somewhere Zoe could have opportunities Diana never had. She was exhausted. Constantly. The kind of tired that lives in your bones. But every morning when Zoe smiled at her, every parent-teacher conference where she heard Zoe was thriving, it was worth it. Diana was fierce. Ask anyone at Cook County, the doctors, the other nurses, the patients. She fought for every life that came through those doors like it was her own family on that table. She didn't give up. Not ever. Not on anyone. But she was also lonely. She dated here and there, nothing serious. How could it be? Between Zoe and work, there was barely time to sleep, let alone build a relationship. And honestly, after Zoe's father, Diana had built walls. Thick ones. She trusted herself. She trusted Zoe. Everyone else had to prove they were worth the risk. At night, after Zoe was asleep, Diana would sit on their small balcony with a cup of tea, looking out at the city lights, and wonder what life might look like if she ever let someone in again. If she could ever let someone in again. She wore armor so well that sometimes she forgot there was skin underneath. Jae-sung and Diana Morrison. The Ice Prince and the Healer. These two people lived in the same city, breathed the same air, watched the same skyline. But they might as well have existed on different planets. Different universes. Until one night in September changed everything. One night when their worlds collided in the most unexpected, impossible way. And that collision? It would set everything on fire. September 23, 2024. 2:17 a.m. Jae-sung gets a call that every person in his position dreads. His younger cousin Minho, 23 years old, practically a little brother to him, has been shot. An ambush. 3 bullets. One in the shoulder, one in the abdomen, one grazed his neck. Minho is bleeding out in the back of a car, and Jae-sung has minutes to make a decision. Here's the problem with being a crime boss. You can't just walk into a hospital with a gunshot victim. Hospitals ask questions. Hospitals call police. Hospitals create paper trails that lead federal investigators straight to your door. Jae-sung has a doctor on payroll for exactly these situations. A former surgeon who lost his license to malpractice but kept his skills. Except tonight that doctor is in Vegas. Unreachable. Jae-sung is holding his cousin in the back of an SUV, Minho's blood soaking through his custom Tom Ford suit, and he has to choose. Risk his entire operation or watch his little cousin die. He makes a choice he'll never be able to unmake. He tells his driver to head to Cook County Hospital. They pull up to the emergency entrance at 2:28 a.m. Jae-sung carries Minho through the doors himself, and the scene that follows is chaos. Nurses running. Doctors shouting. Someone yelling about gunshot wounds and calling the police. And then she appears. Diana Morrison. 8 hours into a 12-hour shift. Exhausted. Hair pulled back. Scrubs that have seen better days. She takes one look at Minho, one look at Jae-sung in his blood-soaked designer suit, and she knows exactly what this is. She's seen it 100 times. The clothes are more expensive this time, but violence is violence. She doesn't hesitate. Gurney now. Trauma Bay 2. Someone paged Dr. Rashid. They wheel Minho in and Jae-sung tries to follow. Diana stops him with one hand on his chest. Family waits outside. I need to. You need to wait outside. Now. There's something in her voice. Not cruelty. Not fear. Authority. The voice of someone who's run toward death enough times that she's not impressed by power or money or threats. Jae-sung, for the first time in 6 years, does what he's told. 47 minutes later, Diana finds him in the waiting room. He's alone. His men are in the parking lot. He sent them away. Too much attention. He's stable, Diana says. The bullet in his abdomen nicked his liver, but we controlled the bleeding. He'll need surgery in the morning, but he'll survive. Jae-sung exhales for what feels like the first time in an hour. Thank you. Diana's expression doesn't soften. Someone will be here to take your statement for the police report. Gunshot wounds are mandatory reporting. That won't be necessary. That's not how this works. Jae-sung reaches into his jacket. Diana tenses, hand instinctively moving toward the panic button. But he pulls out an envelope. He sets it on the nurse's station. $50,000. You treat him, you forget we were here, you never file that report. Diana stares at the envelope like it's radioactive. Then she looks at Jae-sung and her eyes are hard. Disappointed. Like she expected better even from him. I don't need your blood money, she says quietly. And I definitely don't need you bringing more violence into my ER. People die here every night because of men like you. Because of territory disputes and pride and whatever twisted code you all live by. I watch mothers bury their children because of your world. Jae-sung has been threatened by federal agents. He's been in rooms with men holding guns to his head. But nothing, has ever made him feel smaller than Diana Morrison's disappointment. So here's what's going to happen, Diana continues. I'm going to treat your cousin. Not because you paid me. Not because I'm afraid of you. But because I took an oath when I became a nurse. That oath doesn't change based on who's bleeding on my table. Rich, poor, saint, criminal, if you're dying in my ear, I'm going to try to save you. She picks up the envelope and shoves it back into his hands. But you need to leave. Before someone sees you. Before someone recognizes you. Before you bring whatever war you're fighting through those doors. Then she turns and walks away. Jae-sung stands there holding $50,000 in cash, feeling like he's been slapped. And here's the thing, he's not angry. He's stunned. Nobody refuses him. Nobody challenges him. Nobody looks at him with anything but fear or greed or calculated respect. This woman looked at him like he was a disappointment. Like he was less than what he could be. And something in that look cracked something in him. Minho recovers. 3 days in the hospital. Diana checks on him personally during every shift, despite clearly wanting nothing to do with Jae-sung's world. Professional. Efficient. Kind to Minho in a way that makes Jae-sung understand that her anger wasn't about Minho at all. It was about what Minho represented. The violence. The waste. On the day Minho is discharged, Jae-sung tries one more time. He finds Diana in the break room 20 minutes before the end of her shift. Thank you, he says. For saving him. I was doing my job. The money. I don't want your money. I know. I left it anyway. In your locker. Diana's head snaps up. You did what? 50,000. For the hospital. For supplies. For whatever you need. I told you I don't. I know what you told me. But Minho is alive because of you. That's worth 50,000 to me. What you do with it is your choice. He leaves before she can argue. The next day, Diana donates all $50,000 to Cook County's free clinic. Every penny. The clinic that treats uninsured patients, that provides prenatal care to pregnant women who can't afford doctors, that gives HIV medications to people who'd otherwise go without. She makes the donation anonymous. Doesn't take credit. Just does it. Jae-sung finds out, he has people everywhere, and that's when he realizes something terrifying. He's not just impressed by Diana Morrison. He's fascinated by her. Captivated by her. This woman who refused his money, challenged his power, and then used that money to heal people anyway. Have you ever met someone who completely shattered every expectation you had? Someone who walked into your life and suddenly everything you thought you knew didn't make sense anymore? Drop a comment if you've had that moment, because what happens next is about to get intense. For 2 weeks, Jae-sung can't stop thinking about her. This has never happened to him. Women have come and gone from his life like seasons, pleasant, temporary, ultimately forgettable. He's never wanted more. Never allowed himself to want more. But Diana Morrison haunts him. Her voice. Her eyes. The way she looked at him like he was capable of being better. He tells himself he's being ridiculous. She's a nurse. A single mother. She lives in a different world. She made it clear she wants nothing to do with him. But Jae-sung didn't build an empire by giving up easily. He starts showing up at Cook County Hospital. Always has an excuse. Checking on Minho's recovery. Dropping off a thank you gift for the staff. Making sure there were no complications. Diana sees right through it immediately. The first time she's polite but cold. The second time she's irritated. The third time she confronts him in the hallway outside the ER. Your cousin healed 2 weeks ago, she says, arms crossed. His stitches are out. His follow-up appointment is scheduled. Why are you still here? Jae-sung opens his mouth. Closes it. For a man who's negotiated million-dollar deals and talked his way out of federal investigations, he suddenly can't find words. He stops. Starts again. I wanted to make sure he was recovering well. Liar. The word hangs between them. Not angry. Just factual. You're right, Jae-sung admits. And maybe it's the exhaustion in her eyes, or the fact that she's the first person in years to call him out so directly, but he tells the truth. I wanted to see you again. Diana's expression doesn't soften. Why? I don't know. That's not good enough. I know what you are, Mr. Kim. I've seen what men like you do. I've held dying teenagers in my arms because of territory wars. I've watched mothers collapse when I tell them their sons aren't coming home. Gang violence. Drug disputes. Pride and power and all the things you people kill each other over. I don't deal drugs, Jae-sung says quietly. Oh well, congratulations. You only run protection rackets and illegal gambling. That makes it so much better. It does actually. His voice is sharper now. You think all criminals are the same? You think I'm the same as the people who killed your brother? Diana goes very still. How do you know about my brother? Jae-sung realizes his mistake immediately. He researched her. Of course he did. That's what he does. Knowledge is power. But admitting it now makes him sound like a stalker. I looked into you. I'm sorry. That was invasive. Creepy. Exactly what I'd expect from someone like you. Diana's voice is shaking now with anger or something else. Stay away from me, Mr. Kim. Stay away from this hospital. And if you have any decency at all, stay away from my daughter. She walks away and Jae-sung knows he should let her go. Should respect her boundaries. Should go back to his world and forget about the nurse who looked at him like he could be more. But he doesn't. He starts small. So small she almost doesn't notice at first. A week later, Diana finds a coffee on the nurse's station during her night shift. Her exact order: medium vanilla latte with an extra shot, oat milk, no sugar. There's no note. But she knows. She throws it away. The next week another coffee. This time she drinks it. Not because she forgives him. But because it's 3 a.m., she's been on her feet for 7 hours, and wasting perfectly good caffeine feels criminal. Jae-sung takes it as encouragement. He starts showing up. Not in the hospital, he respects that boundary, but nearby. At the 24-hour diner across the street where nurses grab food on their breaks. At the coffee shop she stops at before her shifts. Never intrusive. Never demanding her attention. Just there. One night her car won't start. It's 8:30 a.m. She just worked a 12-hour shift. She's exhausted, frustrated, and the last thing she needs is car trouble. She's calling for a tow truck when a familiar black Mercedes pulls up. Need a ride. Diana wants to say no. Should say no. But she's tired, and Zoe's school starts in an hour, and she can't afford to miss picking her up from her neighbor's apartment. Fine, she says. But this doesn't mean we're friends. Understood. The drive is quiet at first. Then Jae-sung asks about her shift. And maybe because she's too tired to maintain her walls, or maybe because he asks like he genuinely cares, she tells him. About the 15-year-old who came in with a stab wound. About the elderly woman who died of a heart attack. About the young mother who delivered a healthy baby despite having no prenatal care. Jae-sung listens. Really listens. Doesn't try to fix anything. Doesn't offer empty platitudes. Just listens. When they pull up to her apartment building, Diana expects him to say something smooth, to make a move, to leverage this moment. Instead, he just says, "Thank you for letting me drive you home." That's when Zoe comes running out of the neighbor's apartment, backpack bouncing, 7 years old and full of energy despite the early hour. "Mommy? You're late." "Mrs. Chen made pancakes but I said I had to wait for her." She stops, noticing the expensive car, the strange man in the driver's seat. "Who's that?" Diana's protective instincts kick in immediately. She steps between Zoe and the car. "Just someone giving mommy a ride, baby. Go wait by the door, I'll be right there." But Zoe, curious like all 7-year-olds, walks closer. "What's your name?" Jae-sung, who's negotiated with cartel leaders and Russian mobsters without flinching, looks genuinely nervous. My name is Jae-sung. That's a funny name. Are you mommy's friend? He glances at Diana, who's watching this interaction like a hawk. I hope to be. Do you like Spider-Man? Because Spider-Man is the best superhero, and if you don't think so, we can't be friends. And Jae-sung, the Ice Prince of Chicago, the man who once made a rival crime boss disappear for showing disrespect, smiles. Actually smiles. I think Batman is pretty cool. But Spider-Man is definitely in the top 3. Top 3 is acceptable, Zoe declares seriously. Then to Diana, can he come for breakfast? Mrs. Chin made a lot of pancakes. No baby, he has to go. Actually, I love pancakes, Jae-sung says. Diana shoots him a look that could melt steel. But Zoe is already pulling on his hand, and Diana is too tired to fight, and somehow, impossibly, Jae-sung ends up in her tiny apartment, eating mediocre pancakes with her daughter, looking completely out of place in his designer suit among her second-hand furniture. But he's gentle with Zoe. Patient. Answers her endless questions. Doesn't talk down to her. And when Zoe shows him her drawings, pages and pages of crayon masterpieces, he examines each one seriously, like he's studying Renaissance art. Diana watches from the kitchen doorway and something in her chest cracks open. This is the moment. The pivot point. Because the man playing Connect 4 with her daughter, laughing at her knock-knock jokes, listening intently while she explains the complex social dynamics of second grade, this isn't the monster she expected. This is just a man. Lonely. Trying. Human. Still dangerous. Still involved in things she despises. But human. 3 months. That's how long it takes for everything to change. Jae-sung starts coming around more. Never pushy. Always respectful. He brings Zoe books. She's obsessed with reading, devouring chapter books meant for kids twice her age. He brings Diana coffee on her night shifts. Not at the hospital. He respects that boundary, but he makes sure it's waiting for her in the break room, delivered by a friend of a friend who works in administration. Diana resists at first. Keeps her walls up. Reminds herself daily of what he is, what he represents. But slowly, imperceptibly, those walls start to crack. Jae-sung offers to teach Zoe Taekwondo. Every girl should know how to defend herself, he says. Diana's about to refuse, she doesn't want her daughter anywhere near his world, but then he adds, my father taught me when I was her age. He gave me confidence. Discipline. It was the only time he was just my dad, not the boss. The vulnerability in his voice makes her say yes. So twice a week, Jae-sung comes to their apartment and teaches Zoe basic self-defense in the living room. He's patient, encouraging, firm but kind. He shows her how to break a hold, how to make noise, how to run. Nothing violent, just practical skills. Diana watches from the kitchen, pretending to cook dinner, and sees him in a completely new light. He's good with Zoe. Genuinely good. He doesn't treat her like a child to be tolerated but like a person worth knowing. He remembers details, that she loves dogs but is allergic, that her favorite color is purple but only the dark purple like galaxies, that she wants to be either a veterinarian or an astronaut or possibly both. And Zoe adores him. Talks about Mr. J constantly. Asks when he's coming over. Draws pictures of the three of them together. It terrifies Diana. Because she knows how this could end. Knows that men in Jae-sung's world have short lifespans and violent endings. Knows that letting Zoe get attached is dangerous. But she's getting attached too. One night, after a particularly brutal shift, a 12-year-old didn't make it, DOA from a drive-by shooting, Diana finishes at 8 a.m. and finds Jae-sung waiting outside. Not in his Mercedes. In a normal car borrowed from someone. Rough night? He asks gently. She nods, not trusting her voice. Come on, he says. I know a place. He takes her to a 24-hour diner. Not fancy. Vinyl booths and flickering fluorescent lights and coffee that tastes like it's been on the burner for 6 hours. They sit in a corner booth and Diana orders breakfast and then she just breaks. Tells him about the 12-year-old. About how she did everything right but sometimes everything right isn't enough. About how she held his hand while his mother screamed in the hallway. About how she's been a nurse for 8 years and it never gets easier watching kids die. I can't save everyone, she says, voice cracking. I know that logically. But every single one feels like a failure. Like I didn't do enough. Wasn't fast enough. Didn't fight hard enough. Jae-sung reaches across the table and takes her hand. Just holds it. His thumb traces gentle circles on her palm. You saved Minho, he says quietly. You save people every single night. The ones who live, They live because of you. That has to count for something. Does it count if I can't remember their faces? If all I can remember are the ones I lost? Then remember this: you're the reason someone's mother still has her son. Someone's sister still has her brother. You're the reason Minho is alive to annoy me every single day. He squeezes her hand. You saved me too, you know. Diana looks up. You weren't dying that night. Wasn't I? His voice is soft, raw. I was going through motions, Diana. Existing but not living. Doing what was expected. Following the path my father laid out. I was drowning in a world where everyone wants something from me, everyone fears me or uses me, and nobody actually sees me. He pauses, and when he speaks again, his voice shakes slightly. Then you looked at me like I was a disappointment. Like I was capable of better. And for the first time in 6 years, I wanted to be better. Not for my organization. Not for my reputation. For you. Diana's eyes fill with tears. I'm scared, she whispers. Of what you do. Of your world. Of what it means if I let you in and something happens to you. Zoe's already lost her father. I can't let her lose someone else she loves. I'm scared too, Jae-sung admits. I've spent my entire adult life making sure nobody could hurt me. And then you and Zoe walked into my life and suddenly I have everything to lose. They sit there, holding hands across a diner table, while the sun rises over Chicago and the city wakes up around them. That's when Diana realizes, she's already fallen. Completely. Irreversibly. Despite every logical reason not to, despite every warning sign, despite knowing better, she's in love with Kim Jae-sung. And the terrifying part? She thinks he's in love with her too. Their first real date happens 3 weeks later. Diana's neighbor watches Zoe overnight, a rare gift. Jae-sung picks Diana up after her shift, still in her scrubs because she didn't have time to change. You look beautiful, he says. I look like I've been working for 12 hours. Beautiful, he insists. They go to that same diner. It's become their place. They order too much food, talk for hours, and Diana learns things about him that nobody else knows. About how he plays piano, learned as a child, still plays late at night when he can't sleep. About how he reads poetry, Korean poets mostly, but some English ones too. About how he visits his father's grave every Sunday, brings fresh flowers, talks to him about things he can't tell anyone else. Jae-sung learns about her too. About how she wanted to be a doctor but couldn't afford medical school. About how Zoe's father left a note on the kitchen counter and she never heard from him again. About how some nights she lies awake terrified that she's failing Zoe, that one parent working too much is worse than 2 parents who don't care enough. You're an amazing mother, Jae-sung tells her. Zoe is smart, kind, confident. That's all you. She asks about her father sometimes. What do I tell her? Tell her the truth, that he's missing out on knowing the most incredible kid in the world. They talk until sunrise. Again. It's becoming a pattern with them, these conversations that stretch through the night, where time stops existing and it's just the two of them, raw and honest and real. When he drives her home, they sit in the car outside her building, neither wanting the night to end. Diana, Jae-sung says softly, I need you to understand what you're getting into with me. My world is dangerous. There are people who would hurt you to get to me. My organization, some of them already see you as a weakness. And they're right. You are my weakness. You and Zoe. Are you trying to scare me away? I'm trying to be honest. Because if you choose this, choose us, I need you to know what it means. Diana is quiet for a long moment. Then she leans over and kisses him. Soft at first, then deeper. When they pull apart, she says, I'm terrified. Of your world, of what could happen, of everything. But I'm more terrified of walking away from this. From you. That's the night everything changes between them. Inside her apartment, after checking that Zoe is sleeping peacefully at the neighbors, they come together with an intensity that's been building for months. It's not rushed or desperate. Slow, tender, reverent. Like they're both afraid the other might disappear. Jae-sung holds her like she's the most precious thing in the world. Diana touches him like she's memorizing every inch. They make love like people who found something they didn't know they were looking for. Afterward, lying tangled in her sheets while dawn breaks over Chicago, Jae-sung traces patterns on her shoulder and says, I love you. Diana's breath catches. You can't just say that. Why not? It's true. I love you, Diana Morrison. I love your strength and your compassion and the way you fight for people who can't fight for themselves. I love that you called me out on my bullshit and didn't care who I was. I love that you made me want to be better. Tears slip down Diana's cheeks. I love you too. God help me, I do. They fall asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time in years, neither of them has nightmares. The next 3 months are the happiest of their lives. It's not easy, it never could be. Jae-sung's organization is confused by their boss's distraction. He's softer, more patient. He smiles. Some of his men whisper that it's weakness. That loving someone makes him vulnerable. They're not wrong. Diana's co-workers worry too. Her best friend at the hospital, Sarah, pulls her aside one day. "Girl, I know you're in love. I see it on your face. But do you know what you're getting into? Do you know what he is?" "I know," Diana says quietly. "And you're okay with that?" "I'm okay with him. That has to be enough." But it weighs on her. Late at night, when Jae-sung is at her apartment and Zoe is asleep, she watches him play with Zoe's toys left scattered around, and she wonders what kind of future they can possibly have. Jae-sung wonders the same thing. He's in too deep now. His heart isn't his own anymore. It belongs to a 7-year-old who draws him pictures and a nurse who sees the man behind the monster. He'd burn his entire empire down if it meant keeping them safe. He doesn't know yet that soon he'll have to. Because while Jae-sung and Diana fall deeper in love, building this impossible life together, someone is watching. Someone who sees exactly what Jae-sung's enemies see: a weakness, a vulnerability, a way to destroy the Ice Prince once and for all. If this story is touching your heart, if you're feeling these characters come alive, hit that subscribe button because what comes next is going to break you. I promise you, you're not ready for where this is heading. While Jae-sung and Diana were building their impossible love story, while they were stealing moments of happiness in a world that shouldn't allow it, someone was watching. Someone patient. Someone who understood that the strongest fortress has one weakness, the thing its king loves most. Viktor Volkov. If Jae-sung was the Ice Prince, Viktor Volkov was winter itself. 52 years old, head of the Russian Bratva in Chicago for the last decade. Where Jae-sung ruled through calculated respect and strategic fear, Volkov ruled through pure, unadulterated brutality. Let me paint you a picture of who Viktor Volkov really was. He grew up in Moscow during the collapse of the Soviet Union, when the streets ran red and power went to whoever was willing to spill the most blood. Volkov learned early that mercy was a luxury only fools could afford. By 20 he'd killed his first man, his own uncle who tried to take over his father's territory. By 30 he'd built a reputation so terrifying that people crossed the street when they saw him coming. He came to Chicago in 2014, bringing the old-world brutality of the Russian underworld with him. While other organizations were modernizing, getting sophisticated, learning to operate in the shadows, Volkov believed in one thing: fear. Absolute, bone-deep, never-forget-it fear. His territory bordered Jae-sung's on the west side. And for years, Volkov had been trying to expand, to push into the profitable areas the Baekho syndicate controlled. But Jae-sung was smart, organized, and commanded absolute loyalty from his people. Every move Volkov made, Jae-sung countered. It was a stalemate. A cold war. Until Diana. Volkov has people everywhere. Informants, corrupt cops, civilians who owe him favors or fear him too much to refuse. So when Kim Jae-sung, the notoriously isolated Ice Prince who trusted nobody and loved nothing, started showing up at Cook County Hospital, started being seen with a nurse, started bringing a little girl to his high-rise penthouse on weekends, Volkov heard about it. And Volkov smiled. Because he understood something fundamental about power: the strongest man is invincible until you find what he loves. Then he's just another man with a beating heart and a weakness you can exploit. Volkov started gathering information. He's thorough, methodical, patient. He learned Diana's full name, her address, her shift schedules. He learned about Zoe, 7 years old, 2nd grade, loves reading and drawing. He learned Diana's route to work, where she bought groceries, which park she took Zoe to on her days off. He learned everything. But Volkov didn't just watch Diana. He watched Jae-sung's organization. Because an empire is only as strong as its weakest link, and every organization has people who feel overlooked, underpaid, undervalued. He found his weakness in a man named Han. Han had been with the Baekho syndicate for 8 years. He was in Jae-sung's inner circle, not the closest but close enough to know things. Close enough to hear plans. And Han was bitter. Bitter because he'd been passed over for promotion. Bitter because Jae-sung's cousin Minho, younger and less experienced, had more authority. Bitter because he'd given years of his life to this organization and felt invisible. Volkov approached Han 6 months ago. Started with money, everyone has a price. Then added promises of power, of respect, of being valued in ways Jae-sung never valued him. Han took the deal. For 6 months, Han fed Volkov information. Meeting locations. Security protocols. financial transactions. The names of Jae-sung's most loyal people. Everything Volkov would need to systematically dismantle the Baekho syndicate when the time came. But Volkov was patient. He didn't want to just defeat Jae-sung. He wanted to break him. Destroy him so completely that there'd be nothing left to rebuild. And then Jae-sung fell in love and Volkov knew exactly how to do it. See, Volkov understood something about men like Jae-sung. Men who build walls, who refuse to love, who keep everyone at arm's length, they do it for a reason. Because deep down, they know that love is vulnerability. Love is weakness. Love is the one thing that can bring an empire to its knees. Jae-sung had spent 6 years protecting himself by loving nothing. And now he loved everything. A woman. A child. A future he'd never allowed himself to imagine. Volkov was going to take it all away. But here's what made Volkov truly terrifying. He wasn't doing this because he hated Jae-sung personally. This wasn't revenge or passion or emotion. This was business. Cold, calculated business. Jae-sung's territory was valuable, and Jae-sung was in the way, and now Jae-sung had given Volkov the perfect weapon to remove him. Volkov began planning. Not rushing. Planning the way a chess master plans, thinking 5 moves ahead. He started buying off Jae-sung's lower-level soldiers. Not many, just enough to create gaps in security to ensure information kept flowing. He mapped out Diana's life down to the minute. He identified the nights she'd be most vulnerable, when Zoe would be somewhere safe, when Jae-sung would be distracted. And he waited. While Jae-sung and Diana fell deeper in love, while they built their fragile happiness, Volkov circled like a shark smelling blood in the water. The thing about predators is they're patient. They can wait days, weeks, months for the perfect moment to strike. And Volkov was the apex predator of Chicago's underworld. Jae-sung had no idea. He was too happy, too distracted, too in love to see the trap closing around him. He thought he'd protected Diana by giving her security, by keeping his 2 worlds separate, by being careful. He didn't know that Han was feeding every detail to Volkov. Didn't know that Volkov's men had been surveilling Diana for months. Didn't know that every moment of happiness he stole with her was just giving Volkov more ammunition. Love had made Jae-sung blind. And Volkov was about to make him pay for it in the most devastating way possible. The first sign came on a Tuesday night in late February. Diana finished her shift at 8 a.m., exhausted from another 12-hour night. She walked to her car in the hospital parking garage, the same garage she'd parked in hundreds of times. Say, familiar. Her car's tires were slashed. All 4 of them. And carved into the hood with something sharp were 3 words, "You've been warned." Diana stood there, staring at her vandalized car, and felt ice run down her spine. She called Jae-sung immediately. He arrived 20 minutes later with 3 of his men. His face was calm, but Diana had learned to read him. She saw the fury in the tension of his jaw, the cold calculation in his eyes. "Who did this?" she asked. "I don't know. Yet." He examined the damage, took photos, talked quietly with his men in Korean. Then he turned to Diana. "You're not driving this car anymore. I'm getting you something new, something with better security. Jae, it's just a car. It's not just a car. It's a message. Someone knows about us. About you." He pulled her close and she felt him shaking slightly. "I'm putting security on you. Full time." "What? No. Absolutely not." "Diana." "No." She pulled away. "I'm not living like that. I'm not having men in suits following me around while I work. Do you know what that would look like at the hospital? Do you know how that would affect Zoe? I know how it would look if something happened to you. Nothing is going to happen to me. This was probably just random." "It wasn't random." His voice was sharp. "Those words weren't random. Someone is sending a message and I need to know you're safe while I figure out who." They fought about it for an hour. Diana insisting she wouldn't live in a cage, that this was exactly what she'd been afraid of. His world bleeding into hers. Jae-sung insisting that her safety was non-negotiable, that he'd rather have her angry and alive than independent and dead. Finally they compromised. One bodyguard. Discreet. Would stay in the car, wouldn't follow her into the hospital, would just make sure she got to and from work safely. Diana hated it. Hated the feeling of being watched, of being a weakness, of being the reason Jae-sung was stressed and paranoid. But she agreed. Because she saw the fear in his eyes, and she loved him too much to make it worse. The bodyguard started the next day. A man named Chin, quiet and professional. He drove Diana to work, waited in the parking garage, drove her home. Diana tried to ignore him, pretend he wasn't there. Then, a week later, someone followed her home. She noticed the car 3 blocks from the hospital. Black sedan, tinted windows, staying 2 cars behind her. Chin noticed it too. She saw him tense, saw his hand move to something in his jacket. The car followed them for 6 blocks, then disappeared down a side street. Chin reported it to Jae-sung immediately. That night, Jae-sung showed up at Diana's apartment with 2 more men. This is Song and Park. They're going to be stationed outside your building. Diana's heart sank. Jae, this is getting out of control. Someone is targeting you, Diana. I can't. His voice cracked. I can't take chances with your life. So what's the alternative? I live surrounded by armed guards? Zoe grows up thinking this is normal? We hide forever. We don't hide. I handle it. I find out who's doing this and I end it. How? How do you end it? She was crying now, frustrated and scared and angry. By doing exactly what they want you to do? By starting a war? By proving you're the monster everyone thinks you are. If being a monster keeps you alive, then yes. They were shouting now, both of them. All the fear and tension of the past weeks exploding. Your world is bleeding into mine, Diana said, voice shaking. And it's going to get someone hurt. Maybe Zoe. Maybe me. Maybe you. This is exactly what I was afraid of when I told you to stay away. You think I don't know that? Jae-sung's voice was raw. You think I don't lie awake every night terrified that loving you is going to get you killed? But I can't walk away now, Diana. I tried. I can't. You and Zoe, you're everything. I will burn down this entire city before I let anyone hurt you. The words hung between them. Diana saw the truth in his eyes. He meant it. Literally. He would burn Chicago to the ground for her. It should have been romantic. Instead, it was terrifying. Just promise me you'll be careful, Diana finally said. Promise me you'll handle this without starting a war. I promise. He pulled her close, held her tight. I promise I'll keep you safe. Both of you. It was a promise he couldn't keep. Jae-sung started investigating immediately. He pulled in every favor, questioned every informant, traced every possible connection. Who had access to Diana's information? Who knew about their relationship? Who had the resources and the motive to come after her? The list was long. Too long. He had enemies everywhere. Rival organizations, people he'd beaten in business, criminals he'd pushed out of his territory. Any one of them could have decided Diana was the perfect leverage. But Jae-sung didn't suspect his own inner circle. Didn't suspect Han, who'd been by his side for 8 years. Who'd been at his father's funeral. Who'd sworn loyalty to the Baekho syndicate with blood and honor. That was his mistake. Because while Jae-sung investigated external threats, the real danger was sitting in his strategy meetings, nodding along, feeding every single detail back to Volkov. For 3 weeks the tension built. More incidents. Diana's apartment building lost power one night. Just her floor, just for 2 hours. Someone left a dead rat on her car windshield. Small things. Threatening things. Things designed to scare her, to make her feel hunted. The security increased. 3 bodyguards now. 1 on Diana, 2 on Zoe whenever she left for school. Diana hated it more with each passing day, but she was too scared to refuse anymore. Jae-sung barely slept. He was obsessed, working 18-hour days trying to find the threat. His organization noticed. Their boss was distracted, stressed, making uncharacteristic mistakes. Some of his men started to whisper. The ones Volkov had bought off, the ones who resented Jae-sung's rules and his power. They whispered that love had made him weak. That the Ice Prince had melted and now he was vulnerable. They were right. Volkov watched it all unfold exactly as he'd planned. Watched Jae-sung scramble, watched the security increase, watched the relationship strain under the pressure. And then, when the moment was perfect, when Jae-sung was desperate and distracted and running out of leads, Volkov made his move. March 14th. 3.5 months after Jae-sung and Diana first said, I love you. Han approaches Jae-sung with information. Says he's heard through his contacts that Viktor Volkov wants to meet. A truce. A negotiation. Volkov's willing to back off Diana if Jae-sung concedes some territory on the west side. It's exactly what Jae-sung wants to hear. A way to end this without more bloodshed. A way to keep Diana safe. Where and when? Jae-sung asks. Tonight. Midnight. The old warehouse on the docks. Pier 47. Jae-sung is suspicious. He didn't build an empire by being naive. This could be a trap. I thought of that, Han says. That's why I'm suggesting you bring your best men. Show force. Make it clear you're willing to negotiate but not from weakness. It makes sense. Jae-sung agrees. He spends the afternoon preparing. Selects his 8 most trusted men, The ones who've been with him longest, who've proven their loyalty over and over. He arms them heavily. He plans exit strategies, contingencies, signals. Before he leaves, he calls Diana. She's at home with Zoe, her day off. I have a meeting tonight, he tells her. Might be late. Don't wait up. Is it safe? Diana's voice is tight with worry. As safe as these things ever are. Jim will stay outside your building. Lock your doors. I'll call you when it's done. Jae. I love you. He closes his eyes. I love you too. More than anything. It's the last conversation they'll ever have where both of them are whole. Jae-sung and his men arrive at Pier 47 at 11:45 p.m. The warehouse is dark, abandoned. Silent except for the sound of water lapping against the docks. They spread out, weapons drawn, senses alert. Waiting. Midnight comes and goes. No Volkov. No meeting. At 12:17 a.m. Jae-sung realizes the truth. There is no meeting. There never was. This was a diversion. His phone rings. Not his personal phone, the secure line only his closest people have. It's Song, one of the men stationed at Diana's building. Boss, we have a problem. Jae-sung's blood turns to ice. What problem? Park is down. Someone hit him from behind. I'm trying to reach Chin, but he's not responding. I'm going up to check on. Gunshots. 3 of them, clear even over the phone. Then silence. Then a voice Jae-sung doesn't recognize, speaking in Russian accented English. If you want to say goodbye to your nurse, you better hurry. But I don't think you're going to make it in time. The line goes dead. Jae-sung runs. Doesn't think, doesn't plan, just runs. His men follow, piling into cars, engines roaring to life. The drive from the docks to Diana's apartment is 23 minutes in good traffic. Jae-sung makes it in 14, running every red light, pushing the Mercedes to 110 miles per hour on city streets. But 14 minutes is an eternity when someone you love is in danger. While Jae-sung was standing in an empty warehouse, realizing he'd been played, Volkov's men were entering Diana's apartment building. Chin, the bodyguard in the car, never saw them coming. A professional hit, silenced weapon, 2 shots to the head. He died instantly. Park, stationed in the lobby, went down next. Hit from behind with a pipe, skull fractured before he could call for help. Song tried to fight. Got off 3 shots before they killed him. The gunfire echoed through the building and residents locked their doors, called 911, didn't come out. Diana was asleep when they broke down her door. Zoe was at Diana's mother's house for the night, a blessing Diana would be grateful for later, in the brief moments of consciousness she had left. She woke to the sound of splintering wood, men pouring into her bedroom. She didn't scream. Didn't freeze. Every instinct she'd honed from years in the ER kicked in. Assess, react, survive. She rolled out of bed, grabbed the lamp from her nightside table, swung it at the first man through the door. The ceramic base shattered against his skull and he went down hard. Diana ran. Made it to the living room before 2 more men grabbed her. She fought like a demon, kicked, bit, clawed. She was a nurse, not a fighter, but she was strong from years of lifting patients, and she was fueled by pure terror and survival instinct. She got one arm free, grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter, slashed at the nearest man. The blade caught him across the face and he screamed, stumbled back. For a moment, one beautiful, hopeful moment, Diana thought she might actually make it. The door was right there. 10 feet away. She could just... Something hit her from behind. A fist, a weapon she never knew. Her vision exploded in stars and pain, and she hit the floor hard. Then they were on her. Fists. Boots. Pain everywhere. She tried to curl up, protect her vital organs the way they'd taught her in nursing school, but there were too many of them. She tasted blood. Felt ribs crack. Heard someone shouting in Russian. Then a voice, calm and cold, speaking English with that distinctive accent. Enough. The beating stopped. Diana looked up through swelling eyes and saw him. Viktor Volkov. Standing in her destroyed living room like he owned it, wearing an expensive suit, looking at her with the same expression you'd give a bug you're about to step on. Diana Morrison, he said pleasantly. I've heard so much about you. The woman who tamed the Ice Prince. The nurse who made Kim Jae-sung soft. Diana tried to speak, but blood filled her mouth. You should have stayed in your lane, Volkov continued. Saved your patients. Raised your daughter. Kept away from our world. But you fell in love. And love is always fatal for people like us. He pulled out a gun. Expensive. Chrome. Probably worth more than Diana's car. When Kim Jae-sung finds you, Volkov said, I want him to understand something. This is what happens when you refuse to bend the knee. This is the price of his pride. He could have worked with me. Could have shared the territory. But he thought he was untouchable. He aimed the gun at Diana's chest. He was wrong. Diana's last thought before he pulled the trigger was of Zoe. Sweet, innocent Zoe who still believed the world was good. Who still believed that people who loved you protected you. Who still believed her mother would always come home. Diana hoped, prayed, that someone would explain to her daughter why mommy didn't come home this time. That someone would tell Zoe she was loved. That someone would keep her safe. She hoped Jae-sung would keep his promise. Volkov shot her 3 times. Send her mass. Professional. Efficient. Diana felt the impacts like hammer blows. Felt her lungs fill with blood. Felt her body shutting down the way she'd watched hundreds of bodies shut down in the ER. She knew she was dying. Knew it the way medical professionals know things. Not hope or fear, just knowledge. These were fatal wounds. Even if help arrived in the next 60 seconds, even if they got her to surgery immediately, the damage was too severe. She'd spent 8 years saving lives. Now, lying on her own living room floor, bleeding out from gunshots, she couldn't save her own. The irony wasn't lost on her. Volkov and his men left her there. Didn't check for a pulse. Didn't finish the job. Just left, disappearing into the Chicago night like ghosts. Diana lay on her floor, blood pooling around her, and counted her heartbeats. Nurses are good at that, counting heartbeats, measuring time by the rhythm of life leaving a body. She counted 87 heartbeats before she lost consciousness. Someone in the building had called 911 during the gunshots. The ambulance arrived at 12:34 a.m. Paramedics broke down the door, found Diana in a pool of her own blood, barely alive. They worked on her in the ambulance, in the ER, in the trauma bay. Her co-workers, people who loved her, who'd watched her save countless lives, now fought desperately to save hers. By the time Jae-sung's Mercedes screeched to a stop outside Diana's apartment building at 12:37 a.m., the ambulance was already gone. All that remained was blood. So much blood. On the carpet, on the walls, trailing out the door. And 3 bodies, Chin Park Song. Good men. Loyal men. Dead because they stood between Diana and Volkov's revenge. Jae-sung stood in Diana's apartment, surrounded by the evidence of violence, by the shattered remnants of the life they tried to build, and he knew. He knew who did this. Knew why. Knew that while he'd been chasing shadows, the real threat had walked right through his security and destroyed everything. One of his men found him standing there, staring at the blood. Boss. The hospital called. She's at Cook County. Surgery. Jae-sung didn't remember driving to the hospital. Didn't remember parking or running through the ER doors or demanding to see her. He just remembered a doctor, young, exhausted, devastated, saying the words that shattered his world completely. We're doing everything we can. But you need to prepare yourself. The damage is extensive. Even if she makes it through surgery, the next few hours are critical. Jae-sung sat in the ICU waiting room, covered in blood from the ambush at the docks, and waited to find out if the woman he loved would survive the night. Diana made it through surgery. 3 bullets removed. Emergency transfusions. Repair work on her liver, her lungs, her shattered ribs. The trauma surgeon, a woman named Dr. Patel who'd worked beside Diana for 5 years, performed a miracle. But miracles have limits. Jae-sung was allowed to see her at 3:45 a.m. She was in the ICU, connected to machines that beeped and hummed and breathed for her. She looked so small in that hospital bed. Fragile. Broken. This woman who'd been so fierce, so strong, so full of life, now she looked like she might disappear if he looked away. Jae-sung sat beside her bed and took her hand. The same hand that had refused his money months ago. The same hand that had held his during late-night conversations. The same hand that had touched his face and made him feel human again. I'm here, he whispered. I'm right here. You're going to be okay. You have to be okay. Her vitals were unstable. Blood pressure dropping. Heart rate erratic. The machines kept alarming and nurses kept rushing in to adjust medications to stabilize her, to buy her more time. At 4:23 a.m. Diana's eyes opened. Just for a moment. Just enough to see him. Jae. Her voice was barely a whisper, more air than sound. Don't talk. Save your strength. You're going to be fine. Zoe. Blood bubbled at the corner of her mouth. Promise me, keep her safe. I promise. But you're going to keep her safe. You're going to survive this and we're going to. Jae. Her grip tightened on his hand. Weak but there. I knew, the risk. I chose you anyway. No regrets. Diana, please. Stay with me. Please. She smiled. Actually smiled even though it clearly caused her pain. Love you, always. Her eyes closed. The machine started screaming. Nurses and doctors flooded the room, pushing Jae-sung aside. He watched through the window as they worked on her. Watched them do chest compressions. Watched them inject medications. Watched them fight for her life the way she'd fought for so many others. At 4:47 a.m., Diana's heart stopped. They tried to restart it. Shocked her once, twice, 3 times. Pushed medications. Did everything right. But sometimes everything right isn't enough. Time of death, 4:51 a.m. March 15, 2025. The doctor who called it, Dr. Patel, who'd worked beside Diana for years, had tears streaming down her face. Several of the nurses were crying openly. Diana Morrison, 31 years old. Mother. Nurse. Hero to hundreds of patients whose lives she'd saved. Gone. They let Jae-sung back in the room. Let him sit with her body. Nobody questioned it. Nobody asked him to leave. He sat there for 3 hours holding her hand and didn't cry. Couldn't cry. There was nothing inside him anymore. Just a vast empty cold that spread from his chest to his fingertips. The mask he'd worn for 6 years, the Ice Prince, the untouchable crime boss, had shattered the moment he met Diana. She'd shown him how to be human again. How to feel. How to love. Now she was gone, and what remained wasn't the man he'd been before. It wasn't the man he'd become with her. It was something new. Something cold and hollow and dangerous. At 7:52 a.m., Jae-sung finally stood up. He kissed Diana's forehead, cold now, so cold, and whispered, "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. But I promise you, everyone who did this will pay. Every single one." He left the hospital and didn't look back. Diana's funeral was held 5 days later at a small church on the south side. The church that Diana's mother had attended for 40 years. The church where Diana had been baptized, where she'd mourned her brother, where she dreamed of maybe, someday, getting married. Hundreds of people came. Patients she'd saved. Co-workers who loved her. Neighbors who remembered her kindness. Community members whose lives she'd touched. The church was packed, and people stood outside in the March cold because there was no room inside. They told stories about Diana. About the time she worked a double shift and then stayed 3 extra hours because a scared teenager needed someone to hold his hand during surgery. About how she always remembered patients' names even months later. About how she fought with insurance companies and hospital administrators to get people the care they needed. About how she was a hero. Jae-sung stood in the back, wearing sunglasses even though it was cloudy. Wearing a simple black suit, nothing flashy. Trying to be invisible. He couldn't go to the front. Couldn't face Diana's mother, who'd begged her daughter to stay away from him. Couldn't face her co-workers, who'd warned her this would happen. Couldn't face the truth that everyone in that church knew. Diana Morrison died because she fell in love with the wrong man. Zoe sat in the front row between her grandmother and her aunt. 7 years old, wearing a black dress, holding her grandmother's hand. She didn't cry during the service. Just sat very still, very quiet, staring at the casket like she was trying to understand how her mother could be inside it. After the service, as people were leaving, Zoe saw Jae-sung. She broke away from her grandmother and ran to him. "Mr. Jae." She grabbed his hand. "You came." Jae-sung knelt down to her level. "Of course I came. Grandma says Mommy is in heaven now. She says Mommy is watching over me and making sure I'm safe." Zoe's eyes were dry but her voice shook. "Is that true?" Jae-sung's throat closed. "Yes. She's watching over you. Always." "Are you going to find the bad men who hurt her?" Everyone nearby went quiet. Listening. Waiting for his answer. Jae-sung looked at this 7-year-old girl. The daughter of the woman he loved. The child who'd taught him that life could be simple and joyful. He looked at her innocent face, her trusting eyes, and he told her the truth. "Yes." "Good." Zoe nodded seriously. "Because Mommy always said you protect the people you love. And she loved me. So you have to protect me by making sure those bad men can't hurt anyone else." Out of the mouths of babes. "I will," Jae-sung promised. "I'll make sure they never hurt anyone again." Zoe hugged him, this tiny 7-year-old girl hugging a crime boss at her mother's funeral, trusting him to keep his promise. Then her grandmother took her away, shooting Jae-sung a look that could have melted steel. A look that said, "This is your fault. My daughter is dead because of you." She wasn't wrong. After everyone left, Jae-sung drove to Oakwood Cemetery on the south side. To a section he hadn't visited in over a year. His father's grave. The headstone was simple, elegant. Kim Dae-young. Beloved father and leader. The dates of his birth and death. Jae-sung stood there for a long moment before speaking. "I'm sorry, Abioji," he said quietly in Korean. You always told me mercy was weakness. You told me that to rule this world I had to be harder than everyone else. Colder than everyone else. Love nothing, trust no one, show no weakness. He closed his eyes. I thought I could be different. I thought I could have both, the power and the love. The empire and the family. I thought if I was smart enough, careful enough, I could protect what was mine. Pause. I was wrong. You were right. The moment I let Diana in, the moment I loved her, I became vulnerable. And someone used that vulnerability to destroy her. The wind picked up, cold and bitter. I tried to be better than you. Better than this world. I tried to be the kind of man Diana deserved. But that man got her killed. Jae-sung opened his eyes. So I'm done trying to be better. I'm going to be what you raised me to be. What this world demands. I'm going to show Viktor Volkov and everyone watching what happens when you take something from Kim Jae-sung. He bowed once, a traditional show of respect, and turned to leave. The Ice Prince was gone. The man who'd loved Diana was gone. What remained was something colder. Something that had nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. Jae-sung didn't waste time mourning in the shadows. No, grief was a luxury he couldn't afford, not when Diana's blood still stained his hands, not when her daughter slept in a hospital room under armed guard, not when the man responsible was out there breathing air he didn't deserve. So he did what he did best. He became a predator. Within hours of leaving that hospital, Jae-sung activated every asset he had. Every informant, every contact, every person who owed him a favor or feared his name. The Korean syndicate moved like a machine, and Jae-sung was the engine driving it forward. He barely slept. Barely ate. His world had narrowed to a single purpose. Find the traitor, find the truth, and then find Viktor Volkov. It took 48 hours. 48 hours of systematic hunting, of pulling threads until the whole tapestry unraveled. And when the name finally came up, when Han's face appeared in the files, Jae-sung felt something cold settle in his chest. Han. One of his own trusted men. Someone who had sat at his table, who had sworn loyalty, who had looked him in the eye and lied with a smile. The interrogation wasn't pretty. I won't describe the details because some things are better left to imagination, but understand this. Jae-sung needed answers and he got them. Han broke. They all break eventually. And what he confessed made everything crystallize with terrible clarity. Viktor Volkov had orchestrated the whole thing. The bombing wasn't random gang violence or collateral damage. It was calculated. Deliberate. Volkov had learned about Diana, about the one soft spot in Jae-sung's armor, and he'd struck there with surgical precision. But it wasn't just about killing her. That would have been too simple. No, Volkov wanted to break Jae-sung's spirit first. He wanted to destroy the man before taking his territory. Han's voice shook as he repeated Volkov's words. He said once you were broken, taking your territory would be easy. He said a man who loses everything has nothing left to fight for. Jae-sung stood there listening to this, his face completely expressionless. And then he said something that should have terrified anyone who heard it. His voice was quiet, almost conversational. He was right about one thing. I am broken. But broken things are dangerous. Han's fate was sealed in that moment. I won't tell you what happened to him, but I will tell you this. Traitors in Jae-sung's world didn't get retirement plans. After that, Jae-sung gathered his most loyal men. Not everyone. Just the core. The ones who had been with him from the beginning, who had proven themselves time and again. He showed them everything. The evidence of Volkov's involvement. The proof of Han's betrayal. The autopsy reports. The hospital records showing little Zoe's injuries. He laid it all out like a prosecutor building a case, except the jury was already decided and the sentence was death. When he finished, the room was silent. These were hard men, men who had seen and done terrible things, but even they were shaken. Finally, Jae-sung spoke. I'm going to burn his world to the ground. Anyone who stands with him burns too. If you're not with me, leave now. I won't think less of you. Nobody moved. Not one man stood to leave. They all stayed, and in that moment they stopped being just employees of the Korean syndicate. They became something else. They became instruments of vengeance. Jae-sung's final words to them were simple. By sunrise, Chicago is going to know what happens when you touch what's mine. Remember how this story opened. With a city on fire, with chaos consuming Chicago streets, with a narrator telling you that Kim Jae-sung burned down half the city for a woman who could never know? Well, now you're about to see exactly how that happened. The attack began at midnight. 17 locations. All hit simultaneously. Jae-sung had planned this with military precision, and his men executed it with devastating efficiency. They weren't just burning buildings. They were systematically dismantling everything Viktor Volkov had built over 2 decades in Chicago. First, the warehouses. These weren't just storage facilities. They were the heart of Volkov's smuggling operation. Weapons, drugs, contraband, all of it turned to ash. The fires burned so hot that by the time the fire department arrived, there was nothing left but smoking foundations and melted metal. Then the fronts. The legitimate businesses that Volkov used to launder money, the restaurants and clubs and car washes that looked clean on the surface but were rotten underneath. They didn't all burn. Some were simply raided, stripped clean of every document, every hard drive, every piece of evidence. Jae-sung wasn't just destroying. He was collecting insurance, making sure that even if he went down, Volkov would go down with him. The safe houses went next. These were supposed to be secret, known only to Volkov's inner circle. But Jae-sung knew them all. Every single one. Because in his world, information was currency, and he'd been saving up for this exact moment. His men swept through these locations like ghosts, and anyone who tried to resist learned very quickly that mercy wasn't on the table tonight. But it wasn't just physical destruction. Oh no, Jae-sung was far too thorough for that. While his men were burning Volkov's infrastructure, other teams were hitting the financial networks. Offshore accounts suddenly froze. Shell corporations found themselves under investigation. Bank transfers got intercepted. Money that Volkov thought was safe evaporated like morning mist. And the shipments. God, the shipments. Volkov had 3 major deliveries scheduled for that week. Millions of dollars in merchandise. Jae-sung intercepted every single one. Not to keep them. Not to sell them. Just to destroy them. To send a message that this wasn't about profit. This was about punishment. The Allies came next. Volkov's power wasn't just in his own organization. It was in his network, in the other criminals who worked with him, who relied on him, who thought he was untouchable. Jae-sung systematically approached each one with a simple choice. Cut ties with Volkov or share his fate. Most of them were smart enough to see which way the wind was blowing. The ones who weren't? Well, they learned the hard way. The Korean syndicate moved through Chicago like a surgical strike team. They were everywhere and nowhere. Witnesses would later describe seeing groups of men appearing out of the darkness, executing their objectives with ruthless efficiency, and then vanishing before police could respond. It was like watching a magic trick, except the magic was violence and the trick was making an entire criminal empire disappear. Volkov's men tried to fight back. Of course they did. These were Bratva soldiers, Russian mob enforcers who had built reputations on being the toughest guys in the room. But they were facing something they'd never encountered before. They were facing a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. Jae-sung was in the thick of it, leading from the front, and he moved through Volkov's forces like a force of nature. Cool. Calculated. Unstoppable. The police were completely overwhelmed. How do you respond when 17 different locations are under attack simultaneously? When fires are erupting across the city? When gunfire is echoing from multiple neighborhoods? The 911 system was flooded with calls. Fire departments were stretched beyond capacity. Squad cars were racing from one crisis to another, always arriving too late to do anything but clean up the aftermath. And the media. Oh, the media had a field day. By 2 a.m., every news helicopter in Chicago was in the air, broadcasting aerial footage of the burning city. Gang war erupts in Chicago, the headlines screamed. News anchors spoke in grave tones about the escalation of violence, about the failure of law enforcement, about the city descending into chaos. But they were wrong. This wasn't a war. Wars have 2 sides fighting for victory. This was an execution. This was one man with the resources of an organization and the fury of a wounded animal systematically destroying everything his enemy had built. This was Kim Jae-sung teaching Chicago what happens when you take away the only thing that matters. By 2:30 a.m., Viktor Volkov had retreated to his mansion. This wasn't just any house. This was a fortress. 3-story Victorian-style building in one of Chicago's most exclusive neighborhoods, surrounded by walls, protected by cameras and motion sensors, defended by a dozen armed guards who were supposed to be the best money could buy. Volkov sat in his study, drinking expensive vodka and trying to reach his various lieutenants, getting nothing but dead phones and unanswered calls. But he felt safe. He had to feel safe. Because if he wasn't safe here in his own fortress, then he wasn't safe anywhere. At 3 a.m. Kim Jae-sung walked through the front door. He didn't break it down. Didn't blow it open. Just walked through like he owned the place. Because the guards? They were already dead. Or paid off. Or smart enough to walk away when they saw what was coming. Money can buy loyalty, but it can't buy the kind of loyalty that makes a man stand between Kim Jae-sung and his vengeance. Volkov heard the footsteps coming up the stairs. Slow, steady, inevitable. He grabbed his gun, pointed it at the door, his hands shaking despite years of projecting strength and power. And when that door opened and he saw Jae-sung standing there, covered in soot and blood that wasn't all his own, Volkov knew. He knew this was the end. He tried to bargain. Of course he tried to bargain. That's what powerful men do when they suddenly aren't powerful anymore. You've made your point, Volkov said, his voice cracking around the edges. We can negotiate. Whatever you want. Money, territory, I'll leave Chicago. Just name your price. Jae-sung stared at him. Just stared. And then he said something that made Volkov's blood run cold. Diana Morrison tried to negotiate with death in that hospital bed. It didn't listen. Why should I? Volkov tried to fight. He was a big man, trained in combat, experienced in violence. But Jae-sung was methodical. Cold. Every movement calculated. This wasn't a fight. This was a lesson being taught to a man who would never get the chance to learn from it. You said you wanted to break me, Jae-sung said, his voice never rising above conversational level. You did. But you should have made sure I stayed broken. Because a broken man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous thing in the world. I won't describe what happened next. I'll leave that to your imagination. But I will tell you this, justice was delivered. Not the kind that comes from courtrooms and judges. The kind that comes when the universe balances its scales in blood and fire. When Jae-sung left the mansion, he didn't run. Didn't hurry. He walked out calmly, methodically, like a man who had just completed a job he'd been hired to do. And then he did something that would become iconic in Chicago's criminal history. He set the mansion on fire behind him. Picture this. Kim Jae-sung walking down that long driveway in the pre-dawn darkness, his silhouette framed against the growing flames consuming Viktor Volkov's fortress. Sirens wailing in the distance. The sky above Chicago still stained with smoke from a dozen other fires. And one man walking away from it all, having burned down an empire to avenge one person. It echoed the opening of this story, didn't it? The city on fire, the chaos, the destruction. But now you understand. Now you know why. 3 weeks later, Chicago was still trying to make sense of what the media had dubbed the Night of Fire. The official death toll was never fully confirmed. Too many bodies burned beyond recognition. Too many missing persons who were probably dead but couldn't be proven. The property damage ran into the hundreds of millions. Insurance companies were having meltdowns. The FBI opened a task force. The mayor held press conferences promising justice and safety and all the things politicians promise when they're out of their depth. But here's the thing about Chicago's criminal underworld. It operates on reputation and fear, and Kim Jae-sung had just taught everyone a lesson they wouldn't forget. The brothel was finished. Completely, utterly destroyed. The survivors either fled the city or switched allegiances, and not one of them breathed Viktor Volkov's name without looking over their shoulder first. The FBI investigation went nowhere. Witnesses had a strange tendency to forget everything they'd seen. Security footage mysteriously corrupted. Paper trails led to dead ends. It was like trying to investigate a ghost. They knew Jae-sung was responsible. Everyone knew. But knowing and proving are two very different things. On a cold Tuesday afternoon, Kim Jae-sung visited Diana's grave. He came alone. No bodyguards, no entourage. Just him and a bouquet of sunflowers. They were her favorite. She told him once that sunflowers always face the sun, always chase the light, and that's how people should be. Always looking for the good even in darkness. He teased her about being too optimistic. God, what he wouldn't give to hear her laugh at that now. He stood there for a long time just looking at her name carved into the stone. Diana Morrison. Beloved daughter, devoted mother, precious friend. The words seemed inadequate. How do you summarize a person's entire existence in a few carved letters? Finally he spoke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly, like he was having a conversation. I kept my promise, he said. Zoe is safe. She's with your mother now. The surgeries went well. The doctors say she'll recover fully. And they'll never have to worry about money. I set up a trust fund that'll take care of them both for life. Anonymous donor. They'll never know it came from me. He paused, looking down at the flowers in his hands. I know you wouldn't approve of what I did. You tell me vengeance doesn't bring you back. You'd say all that violence didn't change anything, didn't make the world better, didn't honor your memory. You're right. You're absolutely right. But it was all I had left to give you. Then he did something significant. He took off his father's ring. The one that marked him as the head of the Korean syndicate. the one that represented everything he'd built, everything he'd become. And he placed it on her gravestone, leaving it there like an offering, like a symbol of something ending. "I'm leaving Chicago," he said. "There's nothing here for me anymore except ghosts. Maybe I'll find peace somewhere else. Maybe I won't. But I can't stay here, surrounded by reminders of what I lost and what I became." He stood there a moment longer, memorizing the scene, and then he turned and walked away. He didn't look back. Looking back wouldn't change anything. The final scene of Kim Jae-sung's Chicago story took place at O'Hare International Airport. He stood at the gate, boarding pass in hand, preparing to fly to Korea. Seoul. The city where his parents had been born, where his roots were, where maybe he could start over and become someone new. Or at least someone different from the man who'd burned down half of Chicago. Before boarding, he pulled out his phone and recorded a voice message. Not to Diana's mother. Not to his remaining associates. To Zoe. Little Zoe, who would grow up without her mother, who would be raised by her grandmother, who would eventually ask questions about that terrible night and the man who'd been there when her mother died. His voice was steady as he recorded, "When you're older, they'll tell you stories about me. Some true, some not. The media will paint me as a monster. The streets will turn me into a legend. Neither version is completely accurate. Remember this, your mother was the best person I ever knew. She made me want to be better. I failed. But she never did. Be like her, not me. Chase the light like those sunflowers she loved. Don't let the darkness win." He sent the message to be delivered on Zoe's 18th birthday, 8 years and 4 months from now. By then he'd be long gone. Maybe dead. Maybe living quietly somewhere under a different name. But she'd hear his voice and know that someone had loved her mother enough to burn the world for her. As he walked onto the plane, as Chicago disappeared beneath the clouds, Kim Jae-sung thought about a phrase Diana had once quoted to him. She'd been reading poetry, something by Khalil Gibran maybe, and she'd said, "Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars." He'd asked her if she believed that, if she really thought pain made people stronger. She'd smiled that smile that lit up rooms and said, "I think pain gives you a choice. You can let it make you bitter or better. Weaker or stronger. Dead inside or more alive than ever. The suffering doesn't choose. You do." He wondered what choice he'd made. Sitting there in seat 17B, flying away from everything he'd known, he genuinely didn't know if he'd become stronger or just more broken. If he'd honored Diana's memory or desecrated it. If the fire and blood had meant anything at all. They say love conquers all. But sometimes love demands a price paid in fire and blood. Kim Jae-sung burned down a city for the woman he loved. And in the ashes he left behind the man he used to be. Some call it revenge. Others call it justice. He called it the only thing he could do when the light in his life went dark. Because sometimes, the greatest act of love is making sure the world remembers what it took from you. The Korean syndicate continued without him. New leadership emerged. Chicago rebuilt. The Bratva never recovered. And somewhere in Seoul, a man who used to be Kim Jae-sung tried to figure out how to live with what he'd done. But that's another story. This one ends here, with fire and ash and the terrible weight of love that demanded everything and gave nothing back except the cold satisfaction of vengeance delivered. If this story moved you, if you felt every moment of Jae-sung's journey from love to loss to revenge, then hit that subscribe button right now. Because stories like this, stories about the lengths we go for those we love, about the darkness that lives in all of us, about the price of vengeance and the cost of loyalty, these are the stories that make us human. These are the stories that matter. So here's my question for you. What would you do for the person you love most? How far would you go? What lines would you cross? Drop your answer in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the darkest stories teach us the most about light.